So the new agreement between the United States and Afghanistan is short on a lot of specifics, but it does make one thing clear: the U.S. will have a role to play in that country for at least the next 12 years. Tony Blinken is a national security advisor to Vice President Biden, and he is at the White House, and he joins me now. So, Mr. Blinken, let me start with last night's speech by the president. What did he announce? Did he announce the end of the war, or did he announce a path to how the war is going to end, and when is that going to end?
Chuck, I think the president was very clear last night. We are ending the war in Afghanistan responsibly. Next year, we will transition to Afghan lead throughout the country, and by 2014, the Afghans will be responsible for their country throughout the country, and American forces will be coming out of Afghanistan. And so this is really a very important moment, marking the end of a war, but ending it responsibly, ending it in a way that allows Afghanistan to move forward on its own 2 feet.
There were a lot of caveats, though, in the president's speech. You know, you just talked about essentially, as Afghan security forces stand up, the role of both American forces and NATO forces in general stand down. Okay, but what if some of these things don't happen? He also talked about negotiating with the foot soldiers of the Taliban for reconciliation. If these things don't happen, does this agreement mean the United States could end up sending more troops back into Afghanistan?
No, this agreement is very clear, and it's very similar to what we did in Iraq before. That is, as we end the war, as we bring our troops home, we want to build a partnership, a comprehensive partnership with Afghanistan to help it build its own capacity, to deal with its own problems going forward. And so we'll have a relationship beyond 2014 in the areas of security, in the economy, politics, and so forth. And that's very important, because remember what happened in 1989. In 1989, the world abandoned Afghanistan entirely, and we know the result: civil war, the Taliban, 9/11. This time, as we end the war, as we bring our troops home, we'll be building a partnership with the Afghan people, with the Afghan government, to help them deal with the problems they'll face beyond, and also to continue to help us with the interests that we have in the region, particularly dealing with any problems of terrorism, making sure that al-Qaeda, which is now on its heels and which the president has done so much to defeat, doesn't come back.
You said this was similar to Iraq, but one of the things that didn't take place in Iraq is that you could not negotiate an extension of the so-called SOFA, the idea of a forces agreement that would be, in some form or another, a residual U.S. force in Iraq. You couldn't come up with, couldn't get the details done to make that safe for U.S. soldiers, rules of engagement, etc. What makes you convinced that you'll be able to do something like this with Afghanistan when you were unable to do that with Iraq?
Look, this agreement calls for working with Afghanistan and negotiating an ongoing agreement with them over the next year if we decide together that we want to have some kind of residual force after 2014. That decision hasn't been made. We'll see where that goes over the coming months and over the next year. If there is anything after 2014, it will be much smaller and very narrowly focused on training the Afghans and on counterterrorism. That's what we'd be doing if we do anything beyond 2014. But all of that remains to be seen. It remains to be decided by the president. It remains to be negotiated with the Afghans. I don't want to predict how that'll play out, but presumably if they decide that they would like to have some ongoing presence and we decide it's in our interest, then we'll work on it and get it done.
Is it fair to say that there could be U.S. forces in Afghanistan, even if it's in a supportive capacity, in Afghanistan until 2024?
Look, I think what's fair to say is that we're on a very clear glide path to end the war and to end it responsibly, to transition to Afghan control over the next year and a half, first giving them control throughout the country next year, and then full responsibility in 2014. And it's fair to say that after 2014, we're going to have an enduring partnership with the Afghan people and the Afghan government. What that partnership is, what the substance is, what the details are, what the nature of any security relationship is, remains to be seen. There's no commitment in this agreement to have troops in Afghanistan beyond 2014. That chapter remains to be written, if it's written at all.
All right, Tony Blinken, National Security Advisor for Vice President Biden, part of the entire White House National Security team. Thanks for coming on this morning.
Thanks, Chuck.